social cues, predicting consequences, and importantly, putting the brakes on impulsive or inappropriate behavior, basically helping us navigate the social and moral world.
And damage there.
Damage there is strongly linked to conditions like impulsive psychopathy. People who seem to lack empathy, disregard rules, act impulsively.
And the classic story here, the really stark one, is Phineas Gage.
Absolutely tragic, but incredibly informative. Gage was this railroad foreman, 19th century. An explosion sent a huge iron rod straight through the front part of his brain, specifically damaging that orbitofrontal area.
And he survived, but
He survived, miraculously. His intelligence, memory, speech seemed okay, but his personality completely changed. Before, he was known as capable, efficient, reliable, well-balanced.
and after.
After, he became impulsive, irreverent, profane, unable to stick to plans, disrespectful of others. His friend said he was no longer Gage. It was maybe the first really clear case showing that damage to a specific brain area could profoundly alter someone's moral character and social behavior.
Wow.
Uh,
That really grounds it physically, doesn't it? Morality isn't just floating out there. It's tied to the tissue in our heads.
It really does. And modern brain imaging, fMRI studies back this up in less dramatic ways. When you put people in scanners and give them moral dilemmas to think about, different brain areas light up.
Like those trolley problems.
Exactly. The source mentions work by researchers like Green and Haight. They found that different types of moral dilemmas activate different brain networks.
Oh, so
Well, an impersonal dilemma, like pulling a lever to divert a trolley, killing one person far away to save five, tends to engage brain regions associated more with abstract reasoning and cognitive control, like parts of the prefrontal cortex.
okay, the calculating part.
Kind of. But a personal dilemma, like having to physically push someone in front of the trolley to save the five, that activates different areas much more strongly.
Which ones?
Areas linked to emotion, empathy, social cognition, understanding what someone else might be feeling or thinking. Places like the superior temporal sulcus, the posterior cingulate, the medial frontal gyrus. Your brain reacts differently when the moral choice feels up close and personal.
So our moral judgments aren't just one thing. They're this complex mix of cool reason and hot emotion happening in specific brain circuits.
It seems that way. It shows a real physical basis for moral thinking. And the source also touches on brain chemistry, how imbalances, say in dopamine related to ADHD or endorphins in addiction, can affect behavior in ways that have moral consequences.
Right.
So, if we agree that brain health is a key part of mental health, well, neuroscience is showing pretty clearly that our mental health status is deeply connected to our moral functioning.
Okay, this paints a really integrated picture. Mental health is this broad well-being. It's linked conceptually to morality through history and psychology, and now we see physical links in the brain itself.
Right.
So, where does this leave something like moral education? Can teaching kids right from wrong actually, well, heal their minds, like Professor Park suggests?
That's the really provocative core idea from Professor Park's work, isn't it? That moral education could function almost like a medical model, a way to improve mental health and cultivate morality simultaneously.
Because they overlap so much.
Exactly. Think back to all those shared elements we talked about earlier. Self-control, self-esteem, empathy, reality perception, good relationships, managing emotions, knowing yourself.
Okay.
These are goals of both good mental health and moral development. The argument is, the more you cultivate these, the healthier and more moral you become. They feed each other.
And is this idea finding traction?
Well, the source suggests there's a kind of convergence happening. Psychiatry is increasingly interested in positive psychology, promoting well-being, not just fixing illness.
Right, focusing on strengths.
And at the same time, moral education is broadening out. It's not just philosophy anymore. It's drawing heavily on psychology, developmental science, even neuroscience. Moral psychology is a huge field now.
So both sides are kind of meeting in the middle, focused on human flourishing.
You could say that. And this convergence supports the idea that the actual methods used in moral education can directly benefit mental health.
How so? Give me an example.
Okay, take empathy. Nurturing empathy in children, say, using what Hoffman calls inductive discipline, where you focus the child's attention on how their actions affected someone else.
Look, you made Sarah cry when you took her toy.
Exactly. That's not just teaching a moral rule like don't snatch. It's building a fundamental socio-emotional skill. Understanding others' feelings, regulating your own impulses, those are core components of mental health.
So it's not just about learning what's right, but building the inner capacity to do what's right, which is also part of being mentally healthy.
Precisely. Things like secure emotional attachment in early childhood, consistent moral guidance, emotional nurturing, these all contribute to both moral formation and a healthy psychological foundation.
So, from this perspective, moral education isn't just about creating good citizens.
It could actually be seen as a form of treatment or maybe preventive treatment for the mind, especially relevant during adolescence, the source notes, since that's when many serious mental health conditions first appear.
Wow. Thinking of moral education as potentially therapeutic,
Mm.
that really changes how you might view its importance.
It gives it this added functional dimension, doesn't it? Mind healing. But there's an important caveat the source makes sure to include.
Okay, what's that?
While it's crucial to incorporate all these scientific insights from psychology and neuroscience, moral education can't just become applied science. It still needs its roots in philosophy and ethics.
Why is that?
Because concepts like virtue, character, good and bad, free will, responsibility, these aren't just empirical questions. They require philosophical thinking, ethical reasoning, alongside the scientific understanding.
So it's about bringing them together. Science informs the how, philosophy helps with the what and why.
Beautifully put. It's about a careful, integrated approach for genuinely healing the mind, respecting both the biological and the deeply human ethical dimensions.
So wrapping this up, what does this all really mean for you listening to this? This whole deep dive, drawing on Professor Park's work, it suggests something pretty profound.
Yeah, it suggests that working on your moral character,
Yeah.
in developing self-control, building empathy, fostering healthy relationships, figuring out who you are, that's not just about being a good person in some abstract way.
It's tied directly to your own mental health, your own well-being.
Fundamentally linked,
Yeah.
intricately woven together. It really challenges us to think beyond just treating mental illness after it shows up.
And instead,
Instead, maybe we should be actively promoting mental flourishing through understanding ourselves better, our connections to others, even how our brains work in relation to our values.
and I guess here's the final thought to leave you with, the really interesting implication. If developing our moral side, our character, can genuinely act as a form of mind healing, then what kind of responsibility does that put on all of us as individuals trying to live well, as parents, as educators, as a whole society? Should we be intentionally nurturing both mental well-being and moral development together as two sides of the same coin, instead of keeping them in those separate boxes?
Something to definitely think about as you navigate your own life and relationships.